Over the next few weeks, he noticed a few things that felt off, but he didn't think much of them. Until last Wednesday, November 22nd, something happened at home that made him connect all the strange events of the past 2 months. It seemed like the previous experience hadn't really ended. The problem started with their front door lock. The outer door handle spring pin had been broken in half, although it was a bit loose. Jung thought it was still usable and didn't rush to fix it. But ever since then, he had to check the door lock several times before going to bed every night, just to make sure it was securely locked. It became almost like an obsession. Every time he came home from his night shift, all the lights in the house were on. He asked his wife, "Did you leave the lights on?" She replied, "Yes, I did. I have nightmares when I'm alone, and I can hear strange noises outside the door. It's really scary." She described the noises as loud and eerie, like an old woman screaming for about half a minute. Because of her fear, she would leave all the lights on. Whenever he was on the night shift, his wife had mentioned several times that he should get the door lock fixed, but he kept putting it off. He thought it was too much trouble to call and schedule a repair, so he just kept using the faulty lock. Then, at the end of September, something strange happened. Jung came home from his night shift one day, while his wife was away on a business trip. He ordered some grilled meat skewers for dinner and didn't finish them. The next day, he decided to heat them up in the microwave. The skewers were wrapped in tinfoil and brown paper. As soon as he entered the kitchen, he noticed a strange smell, something he couldn't quite place. He decided to open the window to air out the room and place the skewers on the kitchen table. As he opened the window, a strong gust of wind blew in, carrying with a cloud of ash. It was as if someone had been burning paper money nearby, and the wind had swept the ashes into his kitchen. He was completely caught off guard and got covered in ash. The kitchen was also filled with the stuff. He quickly looked outside to see if anyone was burning paper money near his window, but there was no one in sight. Their house was on the first floor and the window faced a cycle shed. He couldn't figure out where the ash had come from. After cleaning himself up and sweeping the ash, he felt exhausted and hungry. He decided to heat up the skewers again. This time, he didn't remove the brown paper and tin foil before putting them in the microwave. He set the microwave to a low power in a short time, thinking it would be safe. He then went to the living room to watch TV while waiting. However, before the microwave finished, he noticed that it had caught fire. The brown paper and wooden skewers were burning inside. He quickly unplugged the microwave and opened the door, only met with a burst of smoke and flames. He tried to blow out the fire, but instead more ash flew out, covering his face and the table. He was completely shocked and felt a chill run down his spine. The sight of the burning foods and the ash reminded him of the strange ash incident earlier. He finally managed to put out the fire, but the skewers were completely charred, and the microwave had a large black stain that he couldn't clean off. He threw everything away and cleaned the microwave as best as he could, but he was left feeling uneasy and exhausted. When his wife returned from her trip, she saw the black stain in the microwave and scolded him for being careless. He didn't dare mention the strange ash incident, thinking it was just a coincidence and not worth worrying about. However, things took a turn for the worse at work. Jung worked at a TV station, responsible for the technical direction of the nightly news broadcast. It was a high-pressure job, especially during major political events. His department had held several meetings to emphasize the importance of broadcast safety. Any mistake during this period could lead to severe consequences, not just disciplinary action but also political repercussions. As a technical director, Jung had to manage dozens of video signals and coordinate with other staff to ensure a smooth broadcast. During one of the most critical broadcasts, he was fully focused and on high alert. Suddenly, he heard a strange noise in his ear, like the sound of winter wind blowing into his ear. For a moment, he couldn't hear anything else. He shook his head, thinking it was just a momentary distraction. But then he heard a scream, like an old woman's, right next to his ear. It was so startling that his hand shook, and he accidentally switched the broadcast feed. The live broadcast cut to the anchor, who was completely unprepared and stunned. Everyone in the control room was shocked. Jung's mind went blank. He quickly corrected the mistake, but the damage was done. Even though it was only a few seconds, it was a significant error. He managed to finish the broadcast, but he was devastated. The director asked him what had happened, and he explained that he had heard a scream and felt an old woman's presence next to him, but no one else had heard anything. His explanation fell on deaf ears. He was docked his entire performance bonus and safety award for that month. He had worked at the station for 10 years without a single broadcast error, but this time he couldn't explain it away. He had to accept the consequences. Fast forward to November 18th, the Cold Clothes Festival, which is the first day of the 10th lunar month when people burn paper money for their ancestors. It was Zheng's night shift again. He finished work at 3 in the morning and decided to walk home instead of riding a bike, remembering the strange incident from before. As he walked, he heard whispers behind him but saw no one when he turned around. Every time he passed under a street light, it flickered twice. It seemed like something was following him. When he reached the intersection where he had seen the old couple before, he saw dozens of circles of burned paper money on the ground. He felt a mix of fear and panic and hurried into his apartment building. He reached his apartment and kicked the floor to turn on the sound activated light. Normally it would stay on long enough for him to reach his door and unlock it, but this time, as soon as he took a few steps, the light went out. He tried stomping his foot and coughing loudly to turn it back on, but nothing worked. He was too scared to take out his phone to use the flashlight. In a panic, he finally managed to unlock the door and get inside. As soon as he closed the door, he heard a short, eerie scream, "Ah!" from outside, like an old man and an old woman. He quickly locked the door and turned on all the lights. He stood there for a few seconds listening, but he didn't hear anything else. He was drenched in cold sweat and felt a mix of fear and relief. He decided to leave all the lights on and went straight to bed, too scared to sleep. The next morning, he woke up to find the living room floor covered with sunflower seeds. The bag of seeds on the table was open and the seeds had spilled everywhere. He also noticed that one of the apples from the fruit plate was missing. He remembered seeing 4 bananas and an apple, but now there were only 3 bananas left. He thought he might have eaten the apple in his sleep, but he couldn't be sure. He decided not to worry about it and just cleaned up the mess. Then it came the night of November 22nd. His wife had returned from her business trip and they both went to bed early. But he had another nightmare. He dreamed that he woke up in the middle of the night to find that he was alone in the room. He heard noises coming from the living room and thought his wife might have gone there to get something. But as he got closer, he realized there were 3 men in the living room, rummaging through their things. One was eating a banana, another was cracking sunflower seeds, and the third was biting into an apple. He was shocked and tried to chase them out, but they fled as soon as they saw him. The man with the banana ran off with it. The one with the seeds spilled the bag as he left, and the one with the apple threw the half-eaten fruit at him. He dodged it, and it rolled under the sofa. He chased the men to the door but found that the door lock had been damaged. It fell off as soon as he touched it, leaving a gaping hole where the lock should have been. He was frantic trying to fix the lock, but it was no use. He was so frustrated that he shouted at his wife, who had woken up and was asking what was going on. He never usually spoke to her like that, but he was too upset to control himself. She looked at him with fear and confusion pointing behind him. Zhang abruptly jolted awake, his heart pounding like a drum. The clock glared 12:30 a.m. His wife lay beside him sleeping soundly, too rattled to fall back asleep. He grabbed his phone to distract himself. Suddenly he noticed his wife twitching in her sleep. Before he could react, she shot upright, breathless from a nightmare. "Honey," she gasped, clutching his arm. "Go check the front door lock. It's broken in my dream." His throat tightened. "What?" "I triple-checked the lock before bed," he insisted, though his voice wavered. She described her nightmare, returning late to find their door wide open, the lock ripped out. In the darkness, she saw Zhang crouched by the doorway, fiddling with the broken mechanism. "Why don't you turn on the lights?" she thought it. As she walked up to her husband, she was so frightened that she froze on the spot. Behind him swayed two shadowy figures, an elderly couple, arms linked, rocking side to side like a pendulum. They saw her, their bony fingers pointed at her. Then she woke. Zhang's blood ran cold. He'd had eerily similar dreams lately. After calming his wife, he rushed to inspect the door. This time when he tested the handle, crack. It snapped clean off. Panicked, they blasted every lights in the room. "This is why I keep lights on at night," his wife cried. "I've had this nightmare a dozen times. We're getting the lock fixed tomorrow." Neither slept a wink. At dawn, Zhang called a locksmith. While waiting, his mind circled back to last night's dream. Thieves stealing a banana, spilling sunflower seeds, leaving behind a bitten apple. On impulse, he peered under the sofa. His stomach lurched. There it was, the missing apple, now oozing a circular black rot. Mold fringed the bite mark like grotesque teeth. He gagged, hurling it into the trash before scrubbing the apartment raw. When the locksmith arrived, he frowned at the broken lock. "This thing's been damaged for over 2 months." Zhang froze. 2 months exactly since those strange incidents began. He realized that the strange events had been happening for about the same amount of time. He hoped that fixing the lock would put an end to the unsettling experiences. He and his wife had been through so much stress and fear over the past 2 months. He really hoped that it was all just a coincidence, and that they could finally have some peace. He said that he deeply realized that organizing other people's stories might just require diligence and inspiration, but writing one's own story requires the most courage.